Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Mondays with Mundy. It's me, Jim Mundy, the Union League Legacy Foundation historian for the Union League of Philadelphia, located at Broad and Sansom Streets in downtown Philadelphia. Beautiful spring day today. So we're going to talk about something that took place in the spring, actually in June of 1864, 156 years ago, during the American Civil War. And it was something that the Union League was very much involved with. It was called the Great Central Fair, and it was organized by the Philadelphia branch of the United States Sanitary Commission. And the Sanitary Commission was organized in June of 1861 as a volunteer organization whose purpose was manifold, but primarily they had two major issues. One was to establish sanitary standards for Army camps, since disease killed more soldiers than bullets at that point. And then secondly, to raise money for things like military hospitals and medical supplies for the Army and the Navy. And what they discovered is that people were willing to give more money when they were having fun. So they had these Sanitary Commission fairs. The first one was in October of 1863 in Chicago. And by the end of the war, every major city in America had one, but even small towns and villages, believe it or not. So the Philadelphia branch of the Sanitary Commission was chaired by a Union League member named Horace Benton, who at the time of the fair in June of 1864 was the vice president of the League. So on January the 11th of 1864, the Union League Board of Directors passed a resolution urging the Philadelphia branch to have a Philadelphia fair. And as you can imagine, they were preaching to the choir. So they organized a committee immediately. There were 38 members on this executive committee. And of the 38 members, 27 of them were Union League members. And actually, the Philadelphia branch of the Sanitary Commission was also dominated by League members. Its executive committee, 12 out of 15. So you can see how engaged Union League members were with the civic life of the city during the Civil War itself. So the fair opens on June the 7th of 1864, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what the fair looked like. Okay, here we go. All right, everybody can see that. All right, let's see, we do that, and then we do this, and then we do this. All right, here we go. So this is what the fair looked like. And you can see it was on Logan Square, now on the Parkway, but back then the Parkway didn't exist. And that big building in the background was the almost completed Cathedral St. Peter's and Paul, which was dedicated in November of 1864, but it's still there today. So the fair building itself was 200 square feet. It was built in 40 days by volunteer labor. You see that flagpole, 216 feet high, donated by ship's carpenters in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia was a major seaport, right? The large avenue that you see running down the center of the photograph with all those skylights was known as Union Hall, Union Avenue, forgive me. Union Avenue was 540 feet long, 64 feet wide, and 51 feet in height. That's what it looks like when it was under construction. So those cast iron Gothic pointed arches are what kept it up. And this is what Union Avenue looked like after the fair had opened. Just, you can imagine how colorful that must have been. And with a larger crowd, it must have been an astounding place to be. All right, and this is the floor plan of the hall itself. So at the top of your photograph would be Vine Street. At the bottom, we have Race. And you can see Union Avenue, number 14, running down the middle, okay? Along the north side, the top side, was the art gallery, 500 feet long, all right? 26 feet wide, 15 feet high. Before we hit the art gallery, this is called the Great Central Fair because it was a fair made up of 3 different sanitary commissions, Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. So New Jersey had its department, if you will, and Delaware had its. So the fair was organized by departments. And here we see the art department. There were close to 100 departments. And what made the fair's management extraordinary for the time is that not for every department, for over half the departments, there was both a men's committee and a women's committee. So they were chaired by men and women respectively. So here is the art department. It was the largest of the departments physically, close to 2,000 paintings and sculpture on exhibit. It was chaired by a League member named Joseph Harrison Jr. and exhibited in this department were the works by a founding Union League member named Peter Frederick Rothermel, who after Thomas Sully was probably the city's greatest known 19th century artist. And there is a painting on the walls in that gallery called Reading the Declaration of Independence, which if you go to the Union League and you go to the Heritage Center and to the Huber Room specifically, I'm sorry, the Sandow Room on the north side, the painting facing you straight ahead is the Rothermel painting that was at the fair itself. Pretty neat stuff. So, and that painting entered the league's collection after the war. All right. So here's the children's department, for example. So there were 14 tables with all different kinds of things that could be sold. On one table, there was a large, giant leather shoe that was made by a league member named Fairman Rogers. And the shoe was surrounded by these dolls that were for sale. And then inside the shoe sat a little girl who was dressed up as an old grandmother, who apparently was the one who made the dolls. And this little girl's job was to sell the dolls, which apparently she did very well. So, and in the department was this dollhouse that was donated by a Miss Biddle. It's a real house. It was designed by Collis and Audenried, an architectural firm in the city at the time, 3 stories, authentic in every way you can imagine. Real marble fireplace, mantles over the fireplaces, real wallpaper, real stenciling, handmade furniture. It had a real functioning library with real miniature books. I understand the fireplaces were working. They were asking $1,000 for it, and they ended up with $2,300. So obviously that worked very well. So that's the kind of thing, this is the kind of stuff they were selling at the fair to make it work. This is the Department of Labor, Income, and Revenue. And it was the most successful of all the departments. It, again, had 2 committees. The men's committee was chaired by L. Montgomery Bond, who was a early Union League member, joined in March of 1863. And the women's committee was chaired by Mrs. Hutter, Elizabeth Hutter. This committee raised $247,000 in 3 weeks by asking Southeast Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware folks, either executives, professionals, factory workers, coal miners, everybody, to donate the equivalent of a day's worth of income or a day's worth of labor. So for example, we mentioned coal. So the Coal Association donated $67,000, and that money came from coal mine owners, operators, coal shippers, and coal miners themselves. The officers of the Pennsylvania Railroad donated $10,000. So and altogether $247,000, which was more than a quarter of the entire money raised by the fair. I'll get to that at the end of the story. This was one of my favorite departments. It was called the Horticulture Department. North side of Union Avenue. It was under a circular rotunda that was 190 feet wide, and in the center of this space was a real fish pond. All right, probably close to 80, 90 feet in diameter, with real water, real canoes, as you can see. You could walk across the bridge to an island that was in the center, and in the center of the island was a band shell, and that's where a band played music 24 hours a day. Philadelphia was a center of horticulture in the 19th century, and so this hall was set up as a series of concentric circles. So you went in through the first circle, then another circle, then another circle, and that eventually led you to the island itself. And since the fair was opened at night, that island was illuminated by over 1,000 gas jets. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner of the image, you can see that circular ring going around the top, and you can see those jets gearing off. There were over 1,000 gas jets to illuminate that at night. And there was a spectacular water fountain with all kinds of jets of water going through it and things like that. So technologically, it must have been astounding to see that at night. So people have to eat, right? Don't we? We do today. And so the restaurant department, which was on the south side of Union Avenue, was approximately 170 feet wide. They had 180 tables. It had a total of employees, which included 160 waiters, chefs, busboys. Imagine it was busy all the time. At any given hour of the day, they could handle 765 people sitting down for a meal, right? The kitchen itself was 60 feet long. It had a range of coal or wood burning ovens that was 26 feet long, 30 cooks constantly cooking food. The visitors of the fair, for instance, ate 22,000 pounds of beef, 11,000 pounds of chicken. They ate 9,000 pounds of lobster, 500,000 oysters, 25,000 quarts of ice cream, like 11,000 quarts of strawberries. I mean, it must have been astounding to try and supply that restaurant with food and just make it run as smoothly as it must have done in all that time. I wish I was there. So another way that they raised money at these fairs, and it had been, precedent was set at other fairs before it got to Philadelphia, is that different companies would donate objects. You would simply vote on someone who would win that specific object. In this case, this was called the Union Vase, and it was donated by the Bailey and Company, which we probably think of more as Bailey, Banks, and Biddle, the great jewelers that were based in Philadelphia, right? It was 3 feet high, solid silver, and was valued at over $5,000. So in order to vote for somebody, you had to pay, actually to get somebody on the ballot, basically, it was $20 per nomination, and then every vote cost $1,000. So pretty sharp way of making money. At the end of the fair, there were 22 nominations for this particular vase, and the top 2 vote getters included the Union League of Philadelphia. Now, unfortunately, the Union League came in second place by about 900 votes to Edwin Church, who was the chairman of the Corn Exchange Bank in Philadelphia. But not bad for a new organization, though, right? Okay. And here is probably the neatest thing to come out of the fair itself. So 2 Union League members, Charles Godfrey Leyland and George Boker, one of the 2 founders of the League, came up with the idea of selling copies of the Emancipation Proclamation. And since Boker knew Lincoln somewhat on a personal basis, he received permission from the president to have these copies printed and then sold at the fair. But that's not just half the story, though. Lincoln visited Philadelphia for the only time in his presidency on June the 16th of 1864 to visit the fair specifically. He arrived at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon with his family, but also with his cabinet members and their families as well. But shortly after arriving and after they rested a bit, Lincoln, William Seward, his Secretary of State, and one of Lincoln's 2 personal secretaries, John Nicolay, were set aside, and they sold 48 copies that had been printed for sale at the fair. Now, the Union League's Board of Publication was going to pay for the original printing, but George Boker stepped in and paid for it himself so that the board didn't have to spend its money that it was already using to print pamphlets and things like that. All right, so at the fair, you could buy a signed copy of the Emancipation Proclamation, signed by Abraham Lincoln. You can see his signature in the lower right-hand corner. And you notice that he also wrote Abraham Lincoln, not A. Lincoln. This is, after all, it was considered an official state document, and that required Abraham. William Seward's signature in the left-hand corner. And then beneath Lincoln's, you have John Nicolay. All right. Can you guess how much this was sold for? I'll tell you, $10 a piece, which was a fair amount of money in 1864. All right. So to me, this was the neatest thing being sold at the fair. I mean, you could buy everything under the sun: umbrellas, canes, men's collars, gutta percha balls, you name it. But something historic like this to come out of the fair is just a great legacy of the fair itself. So the fair would end on June the 28th of 1864 after 3 weeks. It was the second most successful of all the fairs in the United States. Only the one in Manhattan raised more money. So the Philadelphia Fair netted $1,010,000 in 3 weeks' time. And they did that because Philadelphians and surrounding citizens in the area visited the fair. There were approximately 443,000 people who visited the fair over those 3 weeks, and who purchased tickets to get in the fair, and who bought things at the fair, and who contributed into what was probably the greatest philanthropic effort on behalf of the Union during the war itself. So here we have a wonderful story about Philadelphia, about the Great Central Fair, and one that involved the Union League of Philadelphia and its members, not surprisingly at all. So I hope those dots connected pretty well. There's lots more we could talk about sometime in the future, if you will. I mean, we could look at photographs by the gazillions, because there are many of them. So it was a wonderful event in Philadelphia. So in wrapping up, on behalf of the Union League Legacy Foundation, let me thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed our brief little Mondays with Mundy this afternoon, if that's when you're watching. And keep your eye on the TV station for next Monday's episode. So thank you all again. And in the meantime, everybody stay well, stay safe, and take care. Goodbye now.